Welcome, everybody, to the Good Data Podcast. We have a great show for you today. Todd Finnegan will be with us. Todd is CEO of ACS Services, a data center and mission-critical systems company that focuses on automation, integration, and service. Todd has worked in the high-stakes world of data center service for years, including many marathon fix-it sessions where he had to white-knuckle his way through intensely complicated and hugely consequential repairs for like 24 hours plus. You'll hear how his background in high-stakes teams like his collegiate rowing career at Princeton helped him to handle the pressures of the data center industry better than just about anybody I've ever met. Todd is the kind of guy who you meet and think, okay, this guy's going to do the job, whatever it is. There aren't that many people like him. So happy to have him on the show. Let's go. Before we actually sat down, Todd took me on a tour of his beautiful new office.
I have plenty of storage. But this is, that's a security cameras from, he has a feeding live.
You got all your Jace?
I got all that stuff going on here. So this is where the control guys hang out and some of the other technicians come up. I don't let them use the space down there, it's too nice.
And then we sat down in his amazing conference room for our interview. Todd, welcome to Good Data. Thank you for sitting down with me.
My pleasure, Drew.
We've known each other for a long time, but I haven't really gotten a chance to sit down and talk about how you got to where you are, how you started ACS, and why automation and integration is such a good part of the business. So that's what I want to get to eventually. But first of all, what is ACS?
Okay, so ACS Services is automation and critical system services, and I mean that's a mouthful. So ACS for short, obviously. We're a company that is obviously our inception, automation being the first word of the name. That's where we started. It's a niche business. We wanted to focus on a niche business because it's easier to market, because we were brand new, and being all things to everybody is not exactly the way to get your message out, or in our case, to try to find a single customer, because we started out with no tools, no men, no customers, nothing. So automation had become something that was very important to me over the years, being a guy with a mechanical background and understanding how difficult automation is to mechanical contractors, mechanical service providers, etc. I needed to get my arms around it, and I wanted to focus on it very heavily as we moved on in time.
So you talked about your background, and you have a really interesting background to me, so we're going to dive into that a little bit. I always look at LinkedIn and see what the past is, and I didn't know that you went West Catholic. Is that the West Catholic in Philly on 45th?
49th and Chestnut. It's no longer there.
Yeah. Now right. It's the West Catholic, including the girls and boys school.
Right. It was West Catholic boys and girls. My father was a graduate of 1950 from West Catholic, and my older brother 1977. I don't know, maybe 10 years or so after I graduated in 83, I think the boys' school and the girls' school, they had to join forces because I think enrollments were down.
Well, I just know it because we rowed against West Catholic.
Oh,
I was
that's
a rower.
right.
I know you were a
kids.
rower.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
You rowed.
You guys are always bigger than us.
Really?
There must be something in the water in Philadelphia.
Maybe, I don't know. But you went there, and then you went to Princeton. Did you row at Princeton?
Yes,
too?
I did. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. So the Ivy League has this thing where you can't have a sports scholarship.
Yeah.
So, but it didn't hurt that I rowed, and it didn't hurt that I had played football as well. But yes, I rowed at Princeton. In my junior year, I hurt my back. I ruptured 2 discs, so that kind of terminated my career, but I had a really good run my first and second year and into my third year. It was a lot of fun, and it did, at a certain level, it did pay for college.
Yeah, right.
It absolutely did. It helped.
Yeah. Do you miss rowing at all?
No, I can't. I can't think of something I'm less likely to want to do. I mean, you've done it
the same way.
You're like 5 strokes into a 200-stroke race, and you're in oxygen
agony.
debt.
Yeah.
It's absolute agony, and as you've seen many times at the end of a race, people are, leaning over the gunnel of the boat and ejecting the contents of their stomach. It's not a lot of fun when you're in the. What's great about rowing is when you're done.
Yeah.
That's what's totally awesome. How you feel and what you've accomplished. Right. That's what's best about rowing.
It's great to be in good shape. It's great to have the camaraderie and the teamwork that comes with it, the kind of order of everybody being in the boat. Mm-hmm. But yeah, those races are torture.
Yeah, they're torture. But you do learn a lot about relying upon your teammates. And I mean, teamwork that's something that I think that is an absolute hallmark of rowing. I mean, everything about it, the timing of the feathering of the stroke and how the oars catch into the water. I mean, every single thing about it is everybody working in unison. The same, I suppose, with synchronized swimming for that matter, right? Yeah. I mean, they would cop the same plea that they're all about teamwork. But especially when you're in a tremendous amount of pain, being able to make sure that you're opening your back up and driving your legs and, putting the oar in the water at the same time as everybody else, extremely critical that everybody knows that everybody else is responsible for their part in this play. And that's how the boat goes across the finish line fastest, with the least amount of flaws through the stroke and that team working together. I mean, it's really difficult to do that when you're in a lot of pain.
Yeah. So your company has a lot of teamwork focus. I mean, you got guys in the field, you got a high mission critical, work that has to be done, high stress, high communication required.
Yeah.
So, for me personally, that's something that I feel like I got out of rowing. Is that's, I would take away.
I think that's absolutely the case. I think there's a strong parallel to that. I mean, certainly, I think when you sort of get addicted to that, what you can put yourself through and then what you can accomplish by what you can put yourself through, the ability to endure a certain amount of agony and pain in order for this really tremendous result to happen at the other end. Yeah, man, that's data center work. That's absolutely critical environment work. I mean, you go through times. We had an interesting thing that happened to a data center customer of ours, probably the day after Thanksgiving. One of the technicians and I spent what felt like 13 to 14 hours in hell. I mean, it was absolutely a nail biter, and a certain amount of it was beyond our control. Yeah. But I mean, it was an utterly, completely linear panic. It was real stressful, but we didn't lose our cool, and we got to the other end of it and solved the problem for the customer. But boy, oh boy, I mean, it felt great when it was over. But again, when you're in it, oh God, the agony, please make it stop. Yeah. Any port in a storm, But I would say that there are definite parallels to the discipline of rowing, being patient, and then also being able to endure intense amounts of pressure, pain, whatever you want to call it, because critical environments. Now, look, the guy who owns the KFC at the end of the street, he thinks that his fry machine is a piece of mission critical equipment. And it is. It is. And by the way, if his walk-in box, goes down and all that chicken in there starts to get hot and he can't sell that chicken, it's a piece of critical equipment. But the stakes, as you know, the stakes are really high for these people with servers spinning out there on the white space on the white floor. And it gets really intense really fast. And so it takes a certain temperament. And I think that's probably why we're not the hugest company in the world. And I don't have like 95 guys on the road. You definitely bring people on. They see what it's like and they opt out. They don't want to deal with that. They would prefer to do, something that if it's service or if it's installation, something that's less intense. And I've always told the guys, especially when I recruit, when I'm sitting down in front of a young person who's interested to see what we do and what we're all about, and I try to communicate to them at the very beginning, this is SEAL Team 6. it's not the Army. It's SEAL Team 6. So it's very intense. The people that, my technicians that we have, we pour a tremendous amount of money into them for training and for their tools and to develop specific areas of expertise. Yeah, we do commercial office buildings. We work on rooftop units, package units all the time. But we have the distinction of the great amount of our portfolio of being mission critical. And it does take a certain temperament for even our lowest level technician. Some of our apprentices, I mean, we shake them out pretty quickly because some of them just can't deal, with the intensity of it. And sometimes it's not just intensity, but also it's an endurance contest, because when the summer hits and equipment is failing because it's hot outside and nothing really wants to work when it's 95 degrees, it's long hours. It's double shifts because it's just us to get this done. So we all have to pull together. Again, the rowing analogy, we all have to pull together to pull the boat over the finish line and get it done. And so it takes a certain amount of endurance, patience, and the ability to understand that it will eventually stop, and you will be proud at the other end of what you've accomplished. And there's absolute parallels from rowing to this business.
What was the single most important takeaway from that training and that
I
time?
think it's just like anything else. I would think it would be, basically the intensity. Being able to deal with intense moments and the ability to use those lessons and the ability of your training to fall back on your training and deal with whatever's coming at you. And it's no different here. On a daily basis, out of the clear blue sky at 6 a.m. when I'm drinking my first cup of coffee or my third cup of coffee, that I'll get an email or a text from somebody, and all heck has broken loose. And what do we do now? So the ability to fall back on all the things that you've learned. What are the facts? What is the situation? Is anybody hurt? Do we have power? Is water spurting all over the data center floor? Whatever it is, the ability to sort of triage the decision-making process down to its most discrete elements and figure out what's got to get done. That's something that I think is true of all the experiences of my life. I would say that's probably been a constant theme, is the ability to sort of figure out what are the most important things that we need to do in this very urgent situation. And I think that's probably why I enjoy service, as opposed to large, installation projects. There's something nice about an installation project because it has a beginning, middle, and an end. And they do have their problems. There's change orders, there's negotiations, and sometimes things get litigious and nasty. But service, I think it's the utter unpredictability of what this particular piece of equipment is going to do when it's below zero, unadjusted wind chill, when nothing wants to work right, or it's 95 degrees in the air temperature in the shade, but up on a black roof, you've got 120 degree air coming across a coil that's not meant to deal with anything above 95. And the equipment just goes to hell in a handbasket. And so, then we have tenants and we have data center people, and people are running around literally with their hair on fire because their job is on the line. It's not just about somebody being uncomfortable, and I'm sweating. It says 74 in here and it should be 72, Todd. That's not the calls we get. Yeah, we get some of those, but the calls that really, get us up in the middle of the night is when in a 15 minutes period of time, it went from, 72 degrees in the cold aisle to 95 degrees in the cold aisle. And we have an absolutely urgent situation that we have to jump on. So yeah, I would say that, the nature of that and all of my training and everything that's kind of I've done my entire life has sort of prepared me for this. I've made deliberate choices and of career things and sports things, and obviously, what I choose to do for a living, to do this. I didn't like banking. It was boring. I was absolutely bored to tears of banking. So, Yeah, I deal with spreadsheets all day long, but these spreadsheets have to do with men and materials and equipment and trucks and tools and all sorts of cool stuff that I love. And yeah, crazy surprises at 2:00 in the afternoon, on a Tuesday that just completely take your day a hard left turn sideways, and you have no idea, no ability to predict it. I love that.
Yeah.
That service.
Yeah. And so service is incredibly difficult, I will say, but it also parlays really interestingly back into your automation and making sure that before anybody else that there's an issue, ideally. So that's why having that kind of back end BMS system that can relay information to you so that you're proactive and not reactive, is that why your service kind of has to go hand in hand with the automation?
So I would say that probably as a mechanical guy from a mechanical background, I would tell you that I think that there's very few things that we hated more than a building automation guy. We've got this big chiller or this air handler or this whatever that we've installed, and the ductwork's beautiful and the piping's beautiful, but this guy who's sitting in the boiler room with his laptop computer is holding me up, and he can't make my unit run the way I know it's supposed to run. I determined at a pretty early age that I needed to understand this stuff in order to have a complete picture and to be of complete service to my customer, because the only thing the customer hates nothing more than finger pointing of a building automation guy or mechanical guy or gal, whatever, to solve a problem. So those are the two hemispheres in order to get a mechanical problem, especially on a large commercial problem, solved, because very often it is some combination of mechanical and building automation that is at the root cause of the problem. And more these days on the building automation side of things are getting so, IT based, network configurations, subnet masks, IP addresses, things like that. It's not just about dampers and actuators anymore. Yeah. It's really so much about the networks and the network configurations. Some of the most persistent, crazy, and irritating problems that we deal with have to do with networks. Because if it was an actuator, or if it was a wire that was communicating, just regular old signal wire, it's very often networks and network configurations and more IT world stuff that really trips us up. Mm-hmm. So my most senior guys are pretty savvy that way. They're very good with network stuff. They're very IT driven. That's good, especially in the space that we occupy in service, being in data centers, because our customers, our data center customer people, they're IT people. That's the talk they talk. Yeah. So we're able to typically, now obviously we're not IT guys, but we have enough intelligence and enough ability and capabilities in understanding how our equipment works to be able to work with the customer through some of these network configuration issues, to be able to have them understand that we need a special VLAN set up for this, et cetera, to drive the traffic in a different direction.
Today's episode is brought to you by Green Lane Design. Green Lane has been designing, engineering, and building critical facilities for over 10 years, including major enterprise customers as well as co-location facilities. GLD has designed and developed an integrated stack of design disciplines. If you would be interested in a free assessment, go to greenlanedesign.com, click on Contact, and mention the podcast. Well, it's funny that there's a couple pieces of the data center stack that that network touches, and one of them is security. The Target hack a long time ago was because an HVAC contractor had access to the VPN on the Target network, and they were able to hack in. And so having that knowledge of how to segregate and create the separate VLAN that you're only able to VPN into is a selling point, or it should be. Yeah. It should be something that clients look for to make sure they're getting the best value for what they're asking for. And then also reliability. So if that network connection goes down or has a problem, it gets a loss of communication. And since everything's IT based, they could have a problem just because of the network, like you're saying. So, you know, having both those things is really important, obviously. So, but that wasn't always the case. So many things were Modbus based, or, you know, it's sort of the older technology. So how have you kept up? Like what is your...
it's the rate of change within building automation, I think, is the thing that's really astounding. So, you know, I'm an old enough individual at this point to remember pneumatics really well. You know, when it was just pipe with air running through it and a big old nasty compressor in some room down in the bowels of a building somewhere. So I'm looking at that and looking at kind of what's happened over the past several decades and how things have gone from that to where we are now. I mean, the wireless thing is still out there, and I think that there might be people that would probably, tell me that I'm full of soup when I say that the reliability of the wireless stuff is typically not as good as the stuff that's actually wired up. Or perhaps I just haven't seen that technology yet, but everything's still pretty much wired basis, and that could be Ethernet or it could be twisted pair or whatever it is. But the evolution of controls has been something that I've found captivating and fascinating, and I think that there is a certain intellectual curiosity that has to be resident in a controls guy or gal to get them to the upper echelons, if you will, in being a quote unquote a senior technician. I mean, you've seen my lab in my space. And I will tell you that, you know, some of my senior guys, they have their own lab in their house. And they ask me to buy, I just saw this new controller. Todd, will you get one that we can play with? We want to try to break it. So they buy stuff, they play with it, they try to figure out how it works, they try to break it. They're engineers, really. They're trying to figure out how something works and how, more importantly, how it won't work. That I think, especially when you're in the field and you're trying to make something work, understanding that you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that in order to get the best result. They're having that sort of like the wonderful aha moment, intense intellectual curiosity and I think that would probably be something that's very common to most really senior controls guys that are out there or gals that are out there. Building automation people just are constantly, they're input junkies. They want to know more. They need to know why this controller is faster and why it processes things so much better and what kind of processor has it on it. You've got controllers now that you could put that would take care of an air handler or a rooftop unit or even a chiller. But you've got controllers that are out there now that are more powerful than entire building automation systems were 15 years ago. The speed of the processor and what these things can do, that can serve up their own web page. You can web directly into this controller. You don't need a whole building automation system. You literally can have a plant level controller that can act as a head end. Yeah. So crazy. I mean, it just, but that intellectual curiosity, I think, is the thing that kind of constantly drives the advance of technology within a company like mine, because my guys they're constantly thinking about what our customers are, what their needs are, what problems they haven't been able to solve in the past. So they're breezing around one day, they see a training class on this other controller, and next thing you know, we're certified in something else, or they're certified in something else. So a constant investment into the people, but also from them that curiosity that I want to know more, being just an input junkie. That I think is kind of what drives us to continually, move the needle and advance on the building automation side of things. But it's the same in all the businesses and all my business units, and certainly in critical power, which we do, and HVAC as well. That equipment continues to advance. And as some of my more senior HVAC guys will tell you, when they go to training classes, I just had one come back from a centrifugal chiller class with York Johnson, and 3/4 of the class was spent on the software. the controls, the unloading functionality and the PID loops that are, resident within that. And this is what they're looking at. They're spending all their time on the controls aspect of this big piece of iron, this 2,000-ton chiller. But that's where everything's headed. This smart world, these connected device, the Internet of Things, whatever you want to say. But this is where you need to be, and you need to be a person who has the flexibility of intellect in order to be able to make that jump. Otherwise, you're going to be just the guy that punches the tubes in the chiller.
Right. Well, the funny thing is, software has really taken over hardware in so many ways, and the software has gotten so much smarter. But we're still using a lot of the same algorithms, saying PID. I've spoken to other people about this that have been used, is used in navigating ships years and years ago. And there's a lot of opportunity there, I think, to really come to the next level. I don't know what the best products are or anything like that, but there's possibilities around neural nets and machine learning and things like that that really could change things. Is that something that just, if you can throw pie in the sky, something that you're excited about, that you see on the horizon, or is a lot of it just smoke?
Well, I haven't seen any of it. Sometimes, so we've talked about the great things about the service business, but sometimes what we do is really mundane, boring stuff, right? Fuses, belts, and filters. Yeah. And, when you're checking out, a building automation system, controllers work until they don't. Yeah. A lot of I can't oil it. I can't change the tire, rotate the tires on a controller to make it last longer. So there's a certain mundane nature to what we do that's just inherent in the service business, and we accept that. And we've also seen, having tried out and tested a lot of technology, even in our 7 short years, we've seen a lot of technology kind of fall very short. And I would also say that, without naming names on manufacturers and things of that nature, which I think would be dangerous, but who is going to release something that's a pretty well-baked cake, and who isn't, because you've experienced it, because they all make promises. And we have seen, by and large, that what gets actually delivered and the promises that they actually made, it takes several additional revisions in order to get to what. So let's just say it was, XPJ 10.2, XPJ 11.9 gets you to where you thought 10.2 was going to get you to. And we've seen that. And so we're very careful about, we're very cautious when it comes to stuff like that. We have customers that are smart people, and they see the bulletins and they go, I want XPJ 10.2. That's going to solve all my problems. And I have to put up the universal timeout symbol to the Miss Customer and say, can we just make your current site a little bit more stable? And then we'll think about XPJ 10.2 maybe sometime in the future after we've seen what happens to it with other, initial, early adopters. Let's see their, sites go crashing and burning. I don't want to see that for you. We just don't. I'm just getting older and more crotchety and, a little bit less accepting of the new widget and wingding. I like to see it be tried. I mean, we need to adopt, and we do adopt, but I am always cautious of the newest shiny object, which is why when the boys are trying to sell me on a new technology on the automation side of the business, I usually let it sit for a while. Okay, let's sample something. Let's get a couple of these things in here and try to break it and see what we really have. The cream usually rises to the top, right. And that's what we see. The better products have a tendency to be released when they should be released. What's that? I'll sell no wine before it's time kind of thing, Right. But that's usually what we see. Certain brands really do that well. Certain brands, they need something for the next quarter's earnings report, and I think most people understand that, but we're very cautious about how we deploy, because we have to live with the burning building. We have to live with the thing that didn't work. So when I know that something will work and I can recommend a solution that I've seen that works very well, and I can be with a very, very high degree of confidence recommend that to a customer, yes. But in critical facilities where uptime and things of that nature are extremely important, I'm probably pretty well aligned with a lot of my customers being pretty cautious, because what I have works right now. Yeah. My site is stable. Might this thing introduce an element of instability? Might this be a security risk? I think people get more and more conservative the higher the stakes are. And so the newer wingding, who's he, what's it, shiny object, let's just see how that goes before we deploy. To answer your question directly, I am extremely, extremely cynical of new technology, because I think that a lot of us just like new stuff because we like new stuff. Yeah. You know, my kids love new cell phones. There's nothing wrong with the one they're using right now.
Right. Well, it's interesting too, because some of those things are, the customer isn't the data center operator. The customer is the C-suite, or somebody who is looking to integrate all of their business functions in some way. So you look at DCIM, which is not really business building automation. And in some ways it tries to get into that game, but it pretty much fails to get into that game for the most part. But it's used to kind of bridge all these quote unquote silos between the IT operators, the building automation, and then the upper management. And it also adds another layer of complexity. But the idea behind it is to integrate. So as an integrator, what do you think is the best means of integrating across as many silos as possible? And also, where would you want the cutoff to be?
Gosh.
It's a big question, I guess.
That's a huge question, Carl. Yeah. We could have a whole discussion on that for a month. So are we talking about the integration of the needs of the IT guy, what's down inside the rack, along with what the facilities guy needs to deal with?
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point. Yeah.
Yeah. So right. So there's your perfect marriage of the DCIM system and what it was promised to be. I don't know how long ago. I mean, and how many trade shows have promised this or promised that. We've been all around it, and we haven't seen a whole lot of deployments that customers are just absolutely like jumping up and down and clicking their heels about. There's probably 1,000 people listening to this podcast that would say that I'm a charlatan and a liar, but and they could quote you hundreds of very happy customers that have achieved the holy grail of the integration of all of these wonderful functions. So facilities and IT people are very different by nature. One of them is responsible for the power and for chilled water, for cooling, to keep these servers spinning. The other folks live inside those racks, provisioning and IP addresses and networks and all of that stuff, and they could care a whit about the power and everything. That's somebody else's job. I have a specific job and they have a specific job, and they're very interesting personalities when you combine them into a room and try to figure out who's in charge. Because I would tell you that it's probably the IT guys that are really running the world these days. We've become the mechanical guys. I'll put myself in that group. We have become the people that are shoveling the coal into the engine, right? And the IT guys are wearing a hat, and pulling on the whistle, choo choo, as the train moves along. And we just keep shoveling the coal in there to make sure that the train can keep going. But they're really steering things, and it's a different mindset. It's a different temperament. Getting them to getting all of these things into a single system. To give this person what they need, it's extremely difficult, and to appease both the IT folks and also the facilities folks. I haven't seen it yet, but maybe that's just because of my own personal experiences with the kinds of customers that I have. It's we've seen Niagara-based systems. which I still think is a tremendously powerful integration engine, being able to deal with very disparate protocols and also to deal with very customized drivers to be able to pull in different types of proprietary networks.
So it's what is Niagara? Because I know what it is, but
so Niagara is a platform that is marketed by the Tritium folks, and there are lots of different flavors of Niagara and Tritium. All the big controls houses, have their own flavor of it. So, most of the time when you're a Niagara integrator like me, the Tritium folks or the local distributors they need you to join a team. So you got to pick a flavor. So, we picked, some very common flavors, Honeywell, Johnson, Siemens, people like that. But there are dozens of them. Yeah. And they're all very good. And they all use the Niagara framework, which is very nimble, very scalable, modular, and is able, I think, at a certain level everybody's playing catch up to Niagara. And it's a framework that whereby in the days of yore, in the old days of very proprietary Honeywell, Johnson, Siemens, stuff like that, dealing with third party drivers and equipment was just extremely difficult. Being able to pull in a crack unit that spoke, something, some protocol that we didn't speak. It was very difficult to make that happen. The marriage of those things became difficult. The Niagara framework really changed all that and enabled people to bring into a single, controlled device 4 or 5 different protocols. And, that's the other part of this is that, trying to establish what language the UN speaks as its basic language. French, I think, maybe used to be sort of as whatever. So is it BACnet? Is it Modbus? Is it LAN? What is it? So those are the sorts of arguments that Niagara made moot, because I can talk LAN, I can talk Modbus, I can talk BACnet, all under the same device. No problem. We have different networks that we've got to run in order to accomplish that, but it could do it. And so it really made a lot of these problems of integrating various pieces of equipment and different types of equipment a lot easier. Drew, nothing could be further from the truth than to say that automation is easy and integration is easy. It's really a frustrating business. I mean, and really you want to drive your head through the wall half the time, but it's all possible. It's just a matter of, again, probably it's a network configuration issue or something else that we're just missing. A software rev in that piece of equipment that's downline and is bringing the whole segment of network down. Yeah. Those are the sorts of things that really make your skin crawl when you're trying to talk to a customer about how easy this is going to be, and I'm going to make all of your mechanical equipment talk and all your IT equipment talk, and we're going to have this beautiful screen that you're going to be able to see everything, DCIM. Making that happen is and making it happen in a way that doesn't cause you a tremendous amount of torture or the customer a tremendous amount of torture is extremely difficult to do. I haven't seen it. I haven't been able to do it, seamlessly or easily. We do it, but it ain't easy.
Yeah. Well, I've been through it. I mean, we've commissioned data centers, and going through the process of making sure that the BAS works and even the quote unquote DCIM, making sure that some of those things fit together. It can be torture. It's a long process, and some of it goes down to tuning, which is something that you have to have a person do. And that I can't even imagine. I'm glad I don't have your job. But that takes you into some of the other things that you need to tune and keep up with, and another part of the business, which is just, like you're saying, the mundane of PMs and going out in the field and making sure that you're getting ahead of everything. So, what is your framework for making sure that you are always ahead of the game as much as possible, like PM strategy, all that?
Wow, being ahead of the game. So I'll let you know the first time that happens.
Right.
But I think that So at a very early stage, when you're bringing technicians along, especially, I'll just speak very frankly, especially young guys in the HVAC world, what they need to understand, and what I try to tell them very early when they're a first year apprentice, I need you to become the Zen master of checking fuses, changing filters, tightening belts, and cleaning coils. Nothing is more important than that to my customers, because just doing those things will make the equipment run well.
And that goes down to training too.
It does.
And it's checklists and training and
it's constant, and that's the other piece of it. So as they learn to do these things and do them safely, so that they don't injure themselves or their guys that they're working with or the customer's building or equipment, we move them into working with spreadsheets, because we said we did it, but now we've got to also prove that we did it. Yeah. So documentation was something that I spent a lot of time on in the early days when we first started creating checklists. And then from the checklist, creating the deficiency lists, because thank you for the PM, Todd. Appreciate it. Is there anything, what happened to the equipment? What's going on? Do I have a clean bill of health? So that's exactly what we do. So each piece of equipment, each manufacturer is different. The IOM, or the installation, operate, and maintain manuals that accompany each piece of equipment. I have to teach my technicians that we have to read. So it's okay to have a technician standing in front of a piece of unfamiliar equipment looking at an IOM manual that they've never seen this version of this Liebert unit or this version of this Train centrifugal chiller before. So they need to get smart, and they need to get smart fast. They have tons of transferable skills. They've worked on lots of like pieces of equipment before, but they need to get smart on this customer's piece of equipment that is in this facility, because there could be 5 or 6 different options that the one next door doesn't have. So reading the IOM manuals and then changing those checklists to conform to the actual piece of equipment that they're in front of, and then making sure that we document anything that's out of tolerance into the deficiency list. This is the hardest thing for me to teach young technicians to senior technicians to do, and to do well. Documenting our work is the closest thing you can do to make yourself bulletproof. It protects us, it protects the business, but it also importantly, very importantly, protects the customer, because they've got something that they can take to their boss, the CFO or whomever, and say, hey boss, we have to change this compressor out, otherwise this unit will not run, and we're going to have all sorts of problems. So they need that documentation too, in order to make sure that they're in compliance with whatever laws that they need to be in compliance with as well. But staying ahead, wow. In the service business, I think probably the only possibility that we have for that, given the craziness of our business and the extreme temperatures, is that we essentially dedicate a crew to PMs. Yeah. So that there is a crew that is kind of dedicated to PMs, and that's where a lot of our younger folks are, because we need them to understand how to take care of the equipment before they can really troubleshoot. So we keep a crew dedicated to PMs, and we keep 2 other crews that are dedicated to all the madness that happens. So 3, 4, 5 calls came in today, which completely blew a hole in our schedule for tomorrow. But we have a PM crew that's doing what they've got to do, right? So that equipment gets touched, and by the time they touch all the equipment at the end of December, it's time to start all over again, January 1. So yeah, there's a lot of mundane stuff that's happening there, but all around them is this madness that's going on. So Joe picks up the phone and he calls Charlene at the office here and says, a compressor just blew up on this unit, on this building. I got to keep chugging along with the PM, but you're going to have to pull somebody off another building and send them over here. That's what's going on constantly. It drives certain people out of their minds.
Well, operators, it drives out of their minds. They hate paying for PMs. Yeah, I'll tell you.
Well, yeah, but the PMs and touching that piece of equipment also gets my technicians extremely intimate and familiar with that equipment, because I get this all the time. I had a potential customer that called me out to their site and said, I've got all these problems with my equipment. It's really humid in this room. What's wrong? I mean, so if I walked in off the street and I told you that my stomach hurts, I walked into a doctor's office, I just said, my stomach hurts. What's wrong with me? Well, let's open WebMD and maybe we can find 55,000 different things that could be wrong with you. We need to be intimate with that piece of equipment to find out what's wrong with it. Yes, we've touched 1,000 Carrier rooftop units or, Dakin McQuay rooftop units or whatever, but we need to know what's going on with this particular piece of equipment. What are the idiosyncrasies of this particular patient and how do they present? Preventative maintenance allows us to basically give that piece of equipment the care that it needs as per the manufacturer's guidelines, but also to allow my technicians to be familiar with the idiosyncrasies of that. Oh yeah, that's got this really weird section of, the high side on the hot gas bypass is really strange on this, and you gotta, pull on this twice and hit it with your elbow over here in order to make it work, and it takes off and runs like a champ. Those are the sorts of things that our customers ultimately pay for, because we know how to get to the solution as quickly as possible. Because without the touches on the preventative maintenance side of it, we're walking up to a completely unfamiliar piece of equipment. And we need to have been intimate with this thing a little bit in order to be able to make a quick fix when the quick fix is necessary. And it always happens.
And every site is different and has its own problems. Yeah. One site has hard water, and so they get scaling, and another site, I'm sure a lot of sites have hard water, but just being able to know that and use that information to diagnose when it's time is important. And, I've seen that before, but then making the business case, so you're an entrepreneur, this is your company, and so you have to be in sales to a certain extent. It must be difficult to make the sales case sometimes for preventive work and making sure that everything is tuned and working appropriately. So how do you make that case?
Yeah, that's hard. So you and I both know, because we've worked together in the past, we both know that some people don't believe in preventative maintenance. They don't believe in it. Yeah. It's break and fix. Put a new piece of equipment on there, tie the manufacturer and the installer to a warranty, and then just go till something quits. Get somebody out, fix it. So I typically don't get along with folks like that. And I'm not everybody's flavor. And I'm okay with that. At 54 years of age, I've become comfortable inside my wrinkly skin that I am not everybody's flavor. I'm not everybody's taste. I'm really going to only I don't knock on a lot of doors. People refer us a good deal. And we've got, relationships that deepen and grow. So we may be working with XYZ Corporation, but our name goes to several different other property managers within that organization and other facility managers who say, hey, Todd and his guys, really fixed this problem for us before. Maybe you should give them a call. I think that they did a good job. That's really how we've grown our business in terms of the sales cycle. I'm probably not a very good salesman. I know all the wrong things to say. I say them typically, and I caution people, and I'm very cautious about what we take on, because I know that we're the Navy SEALs, right? We're not the Army here. So I have to be careful about what I take on and the promises I make. But on the sales cycle, I've learned that I will not be everybody's flavor. So I have become comfortable with the fact that there are only certain people that are going to want what I'm selling. And I'll try to spend my time finding those folks so that, the frustrating sales cycle isn't so frustrating to me anymore. I have a receptive audience to begin with. But trying to convince somebody who's utterly convinced that preventative maintenance is not in their budget nor their best interest, I'll see you. Yeah. I'll see you. And that's entirely their prerogative. And probably some people are very successful running their business model that way. I'm not here to say that somebody else is wrong and I'm right. I'm a maintenance guy. It's what I do, and it's who I've always been, and what I espouse. I believe that taking care of your very expensive BMW makes it run on the road that much better and that much more energy efficient. Yeah. If you've got a very expensive piece of computer room air conditioning equipment, you need to take care of it so that it runs at peak efficiency and optimal all the time. So I don't bog myself down and frustrate myself trying to sell something to someone who really isn't picking up what I'm laying down. You know what I mean? I don't spend too much time doing that because I would prefer to spend my precious time, and that's what is most precious, on a more receptive audience.
Right. Well, one of the reasons I brought that up, though, is that you do have a very persuasive newsletter that you put out. I think it's monthly.
I wish it was.
Oh, well, it was at one point.
It was pretty close at some point, yeah.
But I was actually always impressed. Every one of those, it seemed like it was written by you because it was very, high level and intelligently written. But and there was always a different topic. And someday, there would be certain themes, but I was impressed by how many different, avenues you went down to explain how to maintain and automate and work with data centers. And I was wondering, that must take a lot of time when you do it. And is that something that has really been beneficial? Has it worked for you?
Yeah, it has. It has. So it's Tech Talk, are the articles that we write, and a lot of that very often will come from my guys. We'll be talking about a particular really difficult topic, whether it be a legacy migration on the building automation side, or water quality on the other side, on the HVAC side of things, and there'll be some. I will typically try to make sure that all the offending parties are nameless, their buildings, their equipment, etc. But there's usually something from my customer base that ends up creating that story. Water quality is one that comes to mind. We had a building that had very poor water quality when we inherited it, and it took a lot of work in order to fix that problem, and it took a couple of years for all the vestiges of those problems to be sort of washed out of the system, and there were pieces of terminal equipment and things like that had continued to fail. So these articles are generally from an experience that we have had, and I try to make it a sort of a lesson learned, and then also try not to fill it with too much technobabble, because a lot of my customers are facilities folks, and they have a precious little bit of time. And they are an inch deep and a mile wide. They know a lot about a lot, but they don't have time to focus, on just Todd Finnegan's world. They also have ceiling tiles that are a problem, and roofs that are a problem, and parking lots that are a problem. So, and those things are probably more nagging. But when you've got a water quality problem, or you've got people who are too cold when they shouldn't be, or too hot when they shouldn't be, you've got a big problem. You've got a lot of very angry people in that building, whether they be servers that are starting to quit on you, or tenants that are threatening not to pay rent. Those sorts of things are what we're dealing with. And these articles are always, informed and coming from, these experiences with our customers in their buildings. And they like them. And when I send them out, especially if it's an article that was inspired by somebody's water quality, I always get a private note sent to me. Yeah, I was the inspiration for this one. Thank you very much for keeping my name out of the article, Todd.
Right.
But yeah, that's where it comes from, and it's been very good. It's not. I mean, you've read them, and they're not really crazy technical. But in there is typically a lesson learned, and I try to keep it like that.
Well, it's intelligent in that there's an insight. There's always a theme and an insight in each one. So, I was wondering too, have you tried to get that into some kind of publication, or it's always just from your email? Some
people have picked it up. I mean, some online publications have picked it up.
Okay.
We got picked up a couple times. Sometimes I would see this thing appear. I saw one of my articles appear in High Rise magazine. an online high. I'm like, how the heck did this person see this thing? But they picked it up. Maybe they saw it out there. Somebody flipped it to them, and they published it. I didn't. Nobody told me that they did.
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm not doing it to make. I'm not writing the articles to make money. I'm really writing the articles to have a convenient excuse to stay in front of my customers.
Yeah.
And because I am a frustrated writer, I've always wanted to be a writer. There it is. There's the bald fact. I write bad poetry and bad short stories and stuff like that, but I've always wanted to be a writer.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's the Irish in you, right?
Especially the bad poetry part, right?
I know. I have the same thing. I've definitely written my fair share of bad poetry.
Oh yeah. I had a whole blue period earlier. You know, when my wife and I first got married, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, I wrote very dark poetry.
But I mean, you know, I'm sort of the James Joyce, like, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, getting in the depths of it.
William Butler Yeats.
Yeah, Yeats is great.
The greatest poet in the history of the English language. Sorry, William Shakespeare.
Yeah, it was fun. I had read Yeats to my wife a couple times, and there's like a couple phrases that always come back up. And this is way aside, but her like nickname growing up was Beamy. And like, because Colleen, Leanie Beanie came Beamy, but that's like one of Yeats's phrases is like, you're beaming it. He uses it like 3 different times, I think, in his poetry. So I was like, I don't know if this is too cutesy, but I'm going to do it. And then she just laughed at me.
As long as it worked.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, you're happily married with children now, so it all worked out.
Yeah. But no, I'm a big fan of Yeats. I guess that's an aside. But so, you know, moving forward, you know, it's great to have referrals and ways in, but the industry is changing. It seems like there's a lot less enterprise data center. There's a lot more colo, and the colos are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So do you feel squeezed at all being a smaller company?
That's interesting you say that. You know, we operate pretty lean. We always have since the beginning. And, you know, we have colos as customers, and, you know, and they're part of, you know, some of them started out as you know, mom and pop colos, if that's a thing. You know, maybe there were 2 or 3 sites, and then they got bought up by a much bigger colo organization. And you see that the sort of the purchasing decisions, instead of being locally, you know, in the Philadelphia area, are now in, you know, Birmingham, Alabama, or something like that. Yeah. And so there's this disembodied voice and email over the phone that doesn't really care about me and what I've done for the facility. They just want to know that, you know, how can I justify the fact that, you know, I'm $100 more expensive than Joe Blow over here. So yeah, it becomes a competitive environment, but I think that, you know, the pendulum always swings one way and then swings back the other. Right. And what we've seen time in and time out, as I tell the boys all the time when they're worried about the fact that we're kind of getting pushed out the door because this organization got bought and new management and all that other stuff, I said, just hang on and wait. Just wait and watch what happens. Always be polite, always be kind, always do the right thing for the customer and their equipment. And then when the other guy comes in and he messes everything up, they'll call us again and stay in touch. Stay in touch. Call them every now and again. Send them a card. Whatever you got to do, just stay in touch. But I find that, you know, people buy from people, Drew. I really believe that. And so my customers know that I'm the owner of this company. And if there's something that they don't like, they can pick up the phone and I'll answer day or night. Yeah. And I'll take care of that problem. I think that's worth something. And if it's not, then I definitely don't want to be working for those folks. Right. But that probably limits me. That probably limits me to a certain audience, to a certain type of organization. And there's probably certain types of organizations that would never want a Todd Finnegan and ACS Services, you know, working for them. But I think they're losing out. And I also think that there's some larger companies, to talk about the pendulum kind of swinging the other way. We have some companies that are very large, multinational companies that are extremely loyal customers because they like our smallness. They like our personal touch. They like the fact that, you know, we'll get to their site within 2 hours and we don't think anything of it. They like the fact that, you know, I have a 4-hour minimum, and it only took 30 seconds to flip a breaker, and we send them a bill for $0. Yeah. You know, we try to treat our customers the way that we would like to be treated, and that's for real. That's not just, you know, BS salesmanship. I mean, that's what I try to communicate to my guys. You leave that site like you would want your house to be left. That is important, and treat that customer fairly, you know. So if we go there and you know it's a 4-hour minimum, you look around and you say, hey, you want me to take care of greasing that fan over there for you while I'm here, or I could do this, that, or the other thing while I'm here? You know, if it's after hours at 2 a.m. you need to get home, fine. But, you know, if it's the middle of the day and we're on a service call and we can take care of that person's needs, then we do it. I find the older I get and the more that things go on, I do see the consolidations and things like that are somewhat unnerving. But the people that I'm dealing with, sometimes what happens, and this is sort of the silver lining to all that. So I have a customer who was part of one group of data centers that got bought out by a bigger group of data centers, and he didn't like the culture and all like that, and so he eventually left, or probably got squeezed out. He ended up somewhere else, picked up the phone, called me, and we walked in and took over their service at another location. So we actually grow in that manner sometimes, because we were the incumbent here, and then the new person sort of realizes that we're competent and we're good, and we develop a relationship with that person. And then the other guy who left and went over here, we pick up him where we left off at his new company. But we do see that our customers enjoy the personal touch. They enjoy the focus on the quality. I mean, laser beam focus on the quality, and just not giving up. And I think if anything could sort of classify our approach, is that I think at the end of the day, our customers absolutely know that we will do everything within our power to get to the end result, to get them in a stable condition and literally turn ourselves inside out and upside down in order to make that happen. They know it. They know we'll do it. I thank God it doesn't need to happen that often, but that is who we are. And I think that is the reputation that we've developed with our customers. And so they have a tendency to be sticky customers. And sometimes when they're taken over by a bigger customer, they'll fight pretty hard to make sure that we stay in, because we've done that for them. And you know plenty of data center operators, and you know that they really need to have a good Rolodex of people that are very reliable, that they know can bail them out of a jam. Yeah. That's worth something. I think it is. I mean, if I was a data center operator, I would want a list of my A team, always right there, you know, laminated on my desk, you know, and every single one of those guys or gals on speed dial. Yeah. That's important. And when the stakes are higher, you need to have a team that you know you can rely on. And I do see that a certain aspect of the market certainly moves and morphs, and people want to, you know, cut costs, and it's all about money at a certain level. Mm-hmm. But maintenance of equipment that is part of your basic business strategy, especially when you talk about data centers, at a certain point, the rubber meets the road. Yeah. And the lack of maintenance or ignoring of that maintenance will ultimately be the lash on the guy who just wanted to save a few pennies. And we've seen that too. We've seen that, you know, be the case more often than not. Ultimately, good practices, good maintenance, and integrity wins the day.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I feel like in a lot of ways I wish I could almost have gone out on that note, because it's a very powerful thing to say. But also have to, you know, just ask you how people can get in touch with you, like, you know, is it website, social, anything like that?
Sure. My LinkedIn profile is out there. And that's and if you just send me an invitation to link up profile, certainly you can get to me there, and all of my information is there. But my cell phone is out there, and our website, you know, acsssllc.com. It's really only a splash page right now. We're working on that, but we've had so many things to work on.
Yeah.
You know, We moved the business this year, and all sorts of crazy stuff happened.
You know, this is a beautiful office.
Thank you.
I think you lucked out.
Yeah, I more than lucked out. Look at the Irish, man. My dad always said he'd rather be lucky than smart, and I think that I'm neither of those things actually. But I think in this particular instance, I was lucky.
Every once in a while, you fall into it, so it's good.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I think I really appreciate you talking to us, Todd. It was great. Thank you. Thanks again to Todd Finnegan for talking with us. You can find Todd on LinkedIn by searching ACSS and his name. Finnegan is spelled Finegan. I've gotten the spelling wrong a few times on that. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Green Lane Design. Remember to mention the Good Data podcast to get that free assessment. That helps everybody. Our music is algorithmically created by JukeDeck, which is pretty amazing. Try it yourself. Visit jukedeck.com. For Good Data, I'm Drew Farnsworth. Talk to you next time on the podcast.